The temperature is in the low 70s under partly cloudy skies in East Rutherford, New Jersey, and the players have already hit the field. Welcome to Giants Training Camp Report presented by Investors Bank. I'm Paul Dottino. He is Super Bowl champion punter Jeff Feagles. So glad you could join us as we continue this look into Giants training camp practices. Now, today is what's known as ramp-up session number 2, Jeff. They had their first practice yesterday, but Coach Judge says the guys won't really get at it with full pads and helmets and hitting until Tuesday of next week because this is still about conditioning.
Yeah, I like the word ramp up because, this is something for these guys. They got to come in. Obviously, Joe Judge said that they were in good condition, so all of the ramp up process is getting these guys ready to play. And, before you know it, Tuesday will be here. But this is football, Paul. This is the guys come out. They're ready for this. They're excited. Everyone around the organization is excited because this is 2021. A lot to look forward to for this New York Giants football team.
Already the players have broken up into some of their individual position groups. A moment ago, you got to look at number 51, Azeez Ojulari. Now, this guy comes out of Georgia, the Giants' second-round pick. And I think it's important to note, we're going to talk a lot of special teams today, Jeff, because that's where rookies usually make their first mark when they get to a professional team. We know they're going to be asked to play special teams, and I think that Ojulari has the physical tools to be dominant.
Oh, there's no question. All these guys that were drafted, they're going to have to be able to do some special teams. Now, Ojulari is a special kind of guy. It's just be interesting to see how much he will have to play special teams because, a lot of these guys are stars in college. They're junior and their senior years. They may not have played a lot of special teams. So it is a little bit of an indoctrination for them to come in and be able to compete and play at different levels. There's so many different types of special teams that you guys can play on. And we'll go over a lot of the types, the players, and what it takes to be on those types of teams.
Well, let's talk about Ojulari for just a second because the tools that he has, very unique. He's big, he's strong, he's fast. He's really got the complete package in terms of skill set. So if you are a special teams coordinator, Thomas McGaughey, what are you trying to do with him? Where do you think he fits best on all the different special teams?
Well, if you look at the punt team, which, by the way, is probably the most important special teams play on the field, it takes up the most yards covering, and there's big plays that can happen. Azeez is the kind of guy, when you look at the punt team, most of those players have those 50s numbers or 40s numbers. Those are linebackers. So that would say, first and foremost, that was probably where he would fit in. The other thing is that on kickoff coverage, you kind of go down the field, you got that speed, the agility to get off of blocks and be able to make tackles. And that's probably a place that he would be too.
You can look at number 25, or Darius Williams out of Oklahoma State. He is a 7th-round draft choice, a defensive back. Now, I know, Jeff, from being in this league for a long time, you know exactly how a DB fits in on special teams.
Yeah, so punt return is a position where most of the defensive backs can play because they're out there on the gunners. And on a punt play, they're covering the gunner that's going down. Actually, it's a little bit easier for those guys because the rules are not in effect when they're playing their position at cornerback. They have to take their hands off these guys. Well, these guys can push these guys down the field, and that's a natural position for cornerbacks to be on the defensive side covering those gunners on punt team.
Well, now we flip it to offense, and we get a look at Gary Brightwell, 6th-round draft choice. He is number 37. Now, Jeremy Springer was the special teams coach at Arizona when Brightwell was in college, and he said from the very get-go, Brightwell wanted to play special teams. This guy loved to make tackles and loved to hit people.
Well, when we were covering him on the draft and when the Giants drafted him in the 6th round, in the 6th round, it was important to know that he said to the media, I love special teams. And I love what he said about that because you know what? Here's a guy that's smart. He knows that being drafted in the 6th round, you're going to have to prove yourself. And the first place you're going to do it is on the field on those special teams. The core 4, I call it. Kickoff return, punt, and punt return. This is the position that you're going to see him on the field for at least all 4 of those.
Now, of course, there's a lot of competition in the running back room. So, again, this is going to be critical for Brightwell if he is going to make an impact and even make the 53, to be quite frank with you.
Well, not only him, but most of the rookies that come in here, this is kind of a hidden secret. And they've got to learn it sooner or later to understand that you may not get the opportunity to play your real position. You're going to make this football team, especially that back end of the roster, guys that are drafted late and free agents. This is a chance for you to make this team by showing that you're versatile and you can take the opportunity when you're on the field in special teams. That's how you make that 53-man roster.
Now, Joe Judge wants to make sure that every second of every practice, somebody is doing something productive. And it's those hidden moments, I think, where the staff really kind of zooms in on certain guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important because, every one of these guys, they're going to have to compete at a position on special teams. And, when you look at the big four, like I said, each one of those positions, the linebackers are very important because, number one, these guys know how to get off of blocks, they know how to make tackles, and they're also very quick. So all of those things being versatile, they all go into playing the positions of special teams. And by the way, what you said about Coach Judge wanting to see these guys, well, hey, Coach Judge was a special teams coach. He understands.
Cam Brown, number 47, was one of the veterans. I call him a veteran. He's only in his second NFL season. But this is a guy who made an impact last year on special teams.
Again, like we said, here's a guy who comes in last year, didn't get to play a lot of linebacker, a little bit here and there, but his main purpose was, we call it the core special teams player. Made his name on special teams, moved up the roster a little bit, got some playing time. But if you ask him, hey, what did you do to make this team last year? Obviously being drafted helps, but special teams was the key.
Now, I think one of the things that's very interesting to me is that a lot of people think special teams, especially in the coverage units, is just run down there and do what you do. But that's not the deal. The truth of the matter is, every one of the guys on that field has a specific job. They get a book with homework, and they've got to pass those tests in the classroom. It's not just what they do out here, Jeff.
No, and we talk about this all the time. It's called transition. You transition from the building out to the football field. What's important about these guys is that they can transition out of the position that they play and being able to take what they learn in the classroom and then translate it out on the field. And special teams got a lot of plays and responsibilities.
Clement, running back, who the Giants picked up as a free agent from the Philadelphia Eagles, is one such player who has not just done well for himself on specials, but excelled. That's how he's been able to stay in the league for a handful of seasons.
Yeah, for the people that have watched the Giants and the Eagles for years, this is a guy that's just proved himself on special teams, and it's probably why he's here. A little depth on the running back position, but more importantly, a veteran presence and depth on that special teams unit for the Giants this season.
He, of course, has to stay healthy. He has had some injury troubles when he was in Philly. But I think, the Giants are certainly looking for some leadership in that room, and a guy who makes plays like this could be a big help.
Well, it's important because we talked about young guys playing special teams. They're young. They don't have the experience at this level at that position. So you have a veteran a guy like Clement, he's a guy that played the running back position but then segued into special teams. He can bring leadership to those positions. He can help these guys learn, and that's important for these young players that they listen to a guy that's been in the National Football League as long as him.
How important do you think it is that when you look at Joe Judge, and we discussed this a bit last year when he came in to be a first-year head coach with the Giants, that he has 10 years of special teams experience behind him, be it at Alabama or at New England?
Well, it's huge because, you have McGahee and you got Tom Quinn, both guys that have been in the National Football League a long time as special teams coaches, and then you have your head coach who's been in it a long time. So that collaboration between them is immense. They'll be able to talk about strategy, talk about personnel. They understand what it takes for a guy to be in the position of the big four that I talked about. They're going to make sure that those guys fit in, and they put them in positions that they can succeed.
Well, a guy who succeeded some last year on specials was one of the Giants' co-captains. In fact, he was the special teams captain specifically. That is safety Jabril Peppers. You look at number 21 right there, and this is a guy who just told us yesterday during the media availability that he wants to stay on special teams. It doesn't matter that he does a ton of things on defense. He wants to be on the field all the time.
Well, you hit the nail on the head there. I think it's Jabril Peppers is a football player. He wants to make sure that he can get on that field as many times as he can, and that's that's the special teams route. Whether it's returning kicks or even going down there and blocking for guys, making tackles. It's obviously a natural segue for a defensive player to play special teams, especially on coverage units. And by the way, he's a heck of an athlete, and we have seen what he can do in college and in the pros returning. So a viable asset to have him in the return game, too.
We're getting a look here at the defensive backs. And, Jeff, as you mentioned earlier, one of the reasons defensive backs are so good on specials is because of the kind of style of football they have to play on defense. It does lend itself to being a gunner or a guy who's going to be an anti-gunner.
Absolutely. Yeah, the other thing too, that the defensive backs, they are on, I know that just real quickly, the defensive backs, they're also guys that can rush the field goal because they have that angle and that speed. And then we talk about the defensive backs here, a natural position to cover somebody down the field, and at that gunner position, holding up the gunners on punt is really important.
And receivers also are very important because they've got the skills that they need to get off press coverage at the line of scrimmage.
They also have the skills at finding the football. That's an important aspect of somebody that's running down on punt coverage because they're getting blocked all the way down. They have to have the ability to find the football and the receiver position. That's a natural for them.
One of the receivers the Giants had last year, C.J. Board, did some good things on specials. He's obviously going to be fighting for a spot on this depth chart. Another guy who has to prove his versatility and his double value.
We talk about the bottom of the roster, and it's not a bad thing that we do that, but it's an important thing because these are the guys that have to compete to make the 53-man roster. They've got to do something special, and that something special is that downing punts inside the 20-yard line, having the ability to get off the ball, off the block, find the football, and by the way, make a play on that thing if it's running around on the ground and not let it go in the end zone.
Well, we get a look at some of these offensive linemen now, and there's Nick Gates, number 65, and we'll go up and down the lineup here with these big hog mollies, so to speak. But what a lot of people don't realize is that there are big guys sometimes on that kick unit too.
Oh, absolutely. Well, obviously the field goal unit is basically the offensive line
No doubt.
But there's also, believe it or not, the kickoff return team. You have the big guys that they can't set up the wedge like the old days anymore, but you got to have some beef in there to be able to handle these guys because, by the way, they're linebackers and cornerbacks and running backs and receivers. They're fast guys coming down there. You want to have some bulk hitting them. So you'll find them mostly on kickoff return and on field goal block and on field goal. Those where the big guys appear the most.
Now, one of the Giants' long snappers, Casey Kreider, who was a former Pro Bowler with the Denver Broncos, we know he is a guy who has done this for a while and certainly done it at a very high level. He's a guy who will only play special teams. He will not play offensive line during the course of the season. But when you're that good at long snapping, they're willing to keep you on the roster.
100%. I think that, that position has evolved over time. I mean, back years ago when I was playing, the tight end was usually the long snapper, or it was an offensive lineman that did that. Now it's a specialized position, and Casey's one of probably the 32 of the guys in the league that's all that they do. Most of the time, there is an offensive lineman. We don't want to leave them out because you got to have a backup, and there's really not a backup long snapper on the roster. So one of those linemen or tight end have to learn how to do it, and some of them have done it in college, so it's a nice asset to have.
You see Kreider there, number 58, Ryan Santurso, one of the Giants' kickers. He's a kicker and a punter. Number 2 was behind him, coming over from Tennessee. Kreider, I can't say enough about the operation last year between Kreider, Riley Dixon, and Graham Gano. They were terrific.
Well, it's important because, even with COVID, and if you have that fluid work, these guys work together, and they were able to be together all season, and that's important for the kicker. And Graham Gano, when you have consistency at the snap and the hold, well, you see what he could do. He makes field goals left and right, and that's important that those guys stick together. It's one of the reasons why you have a long snapper, a holder, who's the punter, and the kicker. They're off to the side, and they work consistently together, and they bring that consistency into the game, and they make field goals.
This is one area where the Giants don't have any turnover. Gano made 31 out of 32 field goals last year. In fact, he comes into this season having made 30 consecutive field goals. That's an all-time Giants record, looking to extend it. You just saw Evan Ingram. I want to mention him for a second, number 88, who just caught that pass in the end zone. Once again, Coach Judge lauding the fact that Evan Ingram is a pro's pro and a guy who just does everything a coach could ask for in practice. He said that last year, and he continues to repeat those same things about the tight end.
I think if I'm Evan Ingram, one of the things that I want to do this year is prove all those haters that said I went to the Pro Bowl last year and I really didn't deserve it. I think here's a guy that comes out and works every day like Coach Judge said, and he has a lot to prove. He's a team-first kind of guy, and you just got to love his work ethic, and he brings that leadership.
Now, there's Devontae Downs.
Okay.
He was one of the Giants' leaders on special teams last season, and he'll be involved in a dogfight trying to make this roster, I think.
Well, the dogfight, he knows that. And by the way, he knows that he can play special teams, and that is a feather in his cap. You look at him last year, he played a lot of special teams. He got to play some linebacker in some games. And the fact is that they can rely on him. I told you about Coach McGahee told me that the one big thing about these players is their availability. Guys that are on the field constantly. They don't get hurt, and they're there on Sundays. Devontae Downs is a guy that you can consistently rely on to play special teams and then fill in at the linebacker position.
What is the key for a linebacker when he plays specials? Is it his ability to hit? Is it his strength? What is the trait that a linebacker will use the most when he's playing special teams?
Well, the linebacker, as you know, depending on the position, if he's a middle linebacker, he's basically the quarterback of that defense, putting guys in positions so he understands the scheme. Same thing with the special teams. Linebackers on punt, they understand about blocking. They understand they have to pick up guys and pick up on twists. So it's the knowledge of the position, it's the knowledge of the speed of the game, and understanding what your coach wants at that particular time in that play that you're going to do.
When talking about what the coach wants, because McGahee and Quinn, the Giants' two lead special teams folks, McGahee the coordinator and Quinn the assistant, they are still here, and they've been doing this a long time. How important is that continuity? Because we know the special teams unit is usually a revolving door.
Well, it's a difficult job because of the revolving door. You have guys coming and going every year, and it's a constant assessment of their abilities and you got to be able to take guys and move them around. I told you about availability. That's what's so important about Coach McGahee and Coach Quinn. They understand the positions, they understand the concepts, and they're trying to find those guys that can put them in these positions to succeed. And by the way, there's a lot of different players that you have to. The special teams coach is the one coach that gets to play, or actually gets to know everybody on team the most. The position coach, like a quarterback coach, they got 3 or 4 guys. Special teams coach, they got 53.
We just got a look a moment ago at Darnay Holmes, second-year pro out of UCLA, a defensive back who also did some kickoff returning. And I think that's going to be an interesting battle for the Giants this year as to who is going to return kicks.
Well, one thing good about Darnay, he's not a rookie anymore. He got some ability to do it last year. So that brings him as experience this year. I think that, you look at a Kadarius Toney, a guy that you probably are going to put in there at some point in time to be a returner because of his explosiveness. But Darnay Holmes is the guy that can do it. The number one thing about the return position, no matter who you are, you could be Deion Sanders, I don't care what it is give the ball back to the offense. That's the most important thing.
What is the biggest jump a returner makes when he gets experience in the league? Because they always say rookies have to make a jump into year 1 and year 2. Is it the feel and the speed of the game that also applies to specials as well as the other positions?
It is. I also think it's to study, to understand the concepts. And the big thing is patience. Returners have to be patient because they have to be able to have confidence in their coverage team, their return team to set up what is being set up, the play. The plays are on special teams. There's plays. If the returner is not patient, those plays are never going to develop.
Of course, there you get a look again at the defensive backs. That's Darius Williams, number 38, second-year pro, was at Albany. Before that, St. Francis of Pennsylvania. Again, little-known guy who was out there as a free agent. Giants scapped him up last year, did everything he could do at practice, and, here he is again at training camp. That's how you earn your keep.
It sure is, and it's, a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is to, number one, make a 53-man roster in the National Football League. But these back-end roster guys, they have to study their playbook for their position. And then they also have to study their playbook for special teams, probably even more, because that's where they're going to have to make that impact on the field. And one of the most important things for all these guys, Paul, is to be able to, when you're on the field and it's your time to shine, you got to shine. And by the way, don't be afraid to jump in front of somebody. So the coaches are looking for a guy that wants to take charge and get as many reps as you can on that field.
How many times have you seen a guy do something like that during a downtime of practice, and it does actually result in him getting a second look or a closer look? I mean, is that just shop talk, I guess is what I'm saying, or do you think it really makes a difference?
It does make a difference because remember, the football field is a big place. These guys got to understand on special teams, you got to be in a certain position. And so, after practice or these types of things, it's just repetition, it's muscle memory. And the more you do it, the better you're going to be, and the better you're going to be, the better chance you have to make the team.
At some point in time, we'll probably also get a look at Ellerson Smith. He was a 4th-round draft choice. Now, I bring him up, although the big guys are certainly in different areas of the field. I bring him up because this is a guy who at Northern Iowa blocked 2 kicks, and he stands at 6'7". Now, we could talk all we want about the gunners. We could talk about the field goal kicker and the punter. But sometimes, as JPP would tell you in Dallas a few years ago during that Super Bowl season of 2011, that the guy on the interior who blocks a kick can make a difference and win a ball game.
The thing about the position like JPP and blocking that field goal, you know, it's constant. You're not going to get there all the time. So you got to do it every single time, knowing that it's going to pay off one of these days. I mean, it's not a lot of fun. You got to have good technique and get your arm at 6'7". You got a good chance to block kicks, but you never know when that play is going to change around the game or the season. Just go back and ask JPP about that block kick against Dallas in 2011.
Now, you held for placements, all right, during your career. So what do you do to guard against the fact that a guy in the interior defensive line on the kick block team, you know he's not going to get blocked by the center because they can't have any contact?
Yep.
I mean, that's a safety rule that was put in a few years ago. So what do you do when you think a 6'7" guy is going to be coming in, whether he be coming in on a punter like Riley Dixon when you were punting, or if it's going to be a field goal block?
Well, there's nothing you can do. It's just all operation time. You know that the snap, the hold, and the kick are a little bit. 2.3 seconds is about what it takes. 1.3 seconds, excuse me. So, you know, usually a block kick is a fundamental of two things. Number one, a breakdown in protection, or the kicker kicked the ball too low. I think that Riley Dixon does an exceptional job at holding field goals, and he's also an exceptional punter. He's working on some things this year to correct what he did last year wrong, and that's just a little bit more being more consistent. Coach McGay, he told me this morning that I asked him what does he need to do to improve from last year, and he said just being more consistent about placement and being more consistent on his punts day in and day out on Sundays.
I don't want to make light of this, but I really think having a very even-keeled demeanor as a kicker, a punter,
of course,
or as a guy who's holding is really critical, because the last thing in the world you need to do is panic.
Yeah, I think that the special teams, but kickers and punters in particular, are a lot like golfers. You know, if you miss that 2-foot putt, you can't take that to the next hole with you. You gotta let it go, and I think that's the difference between the good ones and the bad ones.
I thought that you guys were so good at that because you didn't do anything else football-wise, and you were always off on the side.
Yeah, we're always talking about what we could have done. But it's important. I think mentally, it's probably the most important thing with kickers and punters, to be mentally strong. A lot of guys have the physical tools to do it. It's just they need the mental part of it to be better than the next guy.
Well, it's been fun, Jeff. Certainly
you,
enjoyed this look into Giants practice here on the Giants Training Camp Report, presented by Investors Bank. For Jeff Feagles, I'm Paul Dottino. We'll see you next time.